Now on the programme, a series of explosions in central Damascus, near to the hotel where the French President Emmanuel Macron is reportedly staying. Macron, though, said to have been since received by the Syrian president at the presidential palace. We're hearing, in fact, from Emmanuel Macron's office that he was already inside at the presidential palace when those explosions that we can see in these images happened in the centre of the city. We're also hearing news that this was around the Four Seasons Hotel where Emmanuel Macron was said to have been staying, and that also Emmanuel Macron did not actually hear those explosions at the time because he was already inside the presidential palace talking to Ahmad al-Sharaa, the Syrian president. Of course, a historic visit as well from Emmanuel Macron to Damascus there, the first major Western leader to visit the capital since the end of the war, and of course the removal of Bashar al-Assad as the president there, Emmanuel Macron, there to rebuild or help rebuild the country as part of a series of business deals. But just to repeat once again, we're hearing of those explosions in and around the Four Seasons Hotel where Emmanuel Macron had been staying, although he was said to be inside the presidential palace already meeting with the Syrian president. Well, with me here on set is Matthew Mary Caruchet from our International Affairs desk, and also Clovis Casali, who has covered several times political or visits of Emmanuel Macron around the world, as it were. I mean, Clovis, you know these kind of visits well. You know the kind of security that is in place. You know the kind of entourage that goes with President Emmanuel Macron. What will this mean? What kind of reaction will there be? What kind of operation, I suppose, will have come into place?
I think it's important to say that until the very last minute, we did not have the exact confirmation of this trip for security, for obvious security reasons. And that's why the Élysée announcement that this visit was taking place only arrived on Sunday. We now have more information on the reasons, presumably, of the explosions. AFP, the French news agency, with the President Emmanuel Macron, saying that one of the bombs was placed in a bin and the other in a vehicle close to the Four Seasons Hotel, the hotel where Emmanuel Macron was sleeping last night, where he established his headquarters for this very short 2-day visit to Syria and Damascus. Now Emmanuel Macron is with the Syrian President Ahmad al-Sharaa, presumably the safest place in Syria. Some of the reporters who are currently with the French president, who got to go inside the Syrian presidential palace yesterday, were saying the security is mad. Huge amount of security around the Syrian president, because, yes, he is seen by many Syrians as a bit of a savior, someone who helped free the country, but he has got a lot of inside opposition. We're talking of a war-torn country, Syria. Years and years of fierce violence with jihadist groups battling, and so-called liberation groups battling the Syrian president Bashar al-Assad, obviously now toppled. So this is basically a very serious matter for the Syrian president, because, as you said, Stuart, this was the first visit. This is the first visit of a EU leader, of a leader of the free world, if you'd say, of a democracy in Syria since Ahmad al-Sharaa took over.
I don't know if the word insurgency is too strong, but the insurgency within Syria, of course, has continued since he took over. Matthew Mary, I mean, we had an attack just last week, didn't we, in Damascus?
We did, and that's why the security has been so strong in Syria for the last week. About a week ago, at a cafe near the tribunal, I always say tribunal because I'm French, but tribunal, there are different leaders from Bashar al-Assad's government who are currently on trial for what they did during that. And there's a cafe frequented by lawyers for that trial, and a bomb went off, killing about 10 people. And so since then, there have been really strict security measures. That's part of the reason why Macron's visit has been basically under wraps, and his team didn't want to release any details about where he would be when he was coming. We didn't even know until last night when he arrived that he was actually going to be there. And because of that, they've canceled a lot of the things Macron was scheduled to do. He was supposed to wander around Damascus, visiting different neighborhoods, seeing different minority groups and how they're going about during these current times, and all of that was just shut down.
Because Matthew's absolutely right. In these kinds of trips, the point is, of course, to sign lucrative business deals, show the support of France for these countries, special bonds with these leaders. But it's also to show that France is with the people of Syria. And that's why this kind of visit was important for Emmanuel Macron to visit neighborhoods in Damascus, get to talk, get to interact with local populations. That's always part of these visits. It's not only official, there's also unofficial, or let's say more laid back parts to the visit in these situations with high security. And obviously now we've seen with these explosions that security was a real concern. Well, the Élysée Palace had to cancel large parts of the visit. Emmanuel Macron did go to a landmark, a symbolic place in Damascus, which is the Umayyad Mosque. I visited it just before the war in Syria. It really is one of the most important places in Syria. So very symbolic, that visit. He was there with Ahmed al-Sharaa and Emmanuel Macron at the time yesterday, saying in these uncertain days for the region, Syria is reborn thanks to its people, thanks to its unity and its desire for a better future. France is here by its side. Well, these words resonate quite differently in the view of these attacks. Again, showing the unity, maybe, but there is strong opposition. There are real security concerns in Syria. The Élysée Palace, before organising this trip, knew they were high security risks. But again, we've seen it. It is very real. One last piece of information, the Élysée Palace saying that Emmanuel Macron did not hear the explosions on his way to the Syrian presidential palace. Now the French president in probably what is the safest place in Syria.
Yeah, we're seeing now all those images that you've been seeing over the last few moments of the aftermath, and indeed one at least small explosion happening there in the centre of Damascus. Amid that there it just went off there once again. I mean, Clovis, the security that is put in place, presumably most of it is organised from the Damascus side, but there would have been a lot of input as well, presumably from the French presidential side as well, to ensure that security was fully in place and fully strong enough, I suppose.
I'll give you a bit of an insight in these presidential visits. When I went to Emmanuel Macron's last visit, when I followed the last visit to Beijing in China, the Chinese were in charge of the security, very much. Huge personnel, a lot of people. But at the same time, you did have the French president's personal security and key people, very well trained, who follow Emmanuel Macron on each one of his trips. And sometimes you could sense a few tensions between the French security services and the Chinese security services. But at the end of the day, the French can say what they want. The local police knows the terrain, knows the place much better. They know the facilities much better. So they have the upper hand. They decide at the end of the day. And of course, when Emmanuel Macron goes to China, it is also a visit honouring France, but also with China playing a very important part. So the Chinese security services were in charge very much so. And I believe that when it comes to Syria, of course, the Syrian forces know the place better, know the threats better. So they have the upper hand. They are in charge. But of course, in close coordination with the French forces, the security personnel following the president from Paris to Damascus, from Damascus to every step of the way, every part of the visit. You have Emmanuel Macron surrounded by his bodyguards, by his security forces. A lot of groundwork also done before the visit by French services. So Emmanuel Macron with his bodyguards around, but of course the Syrian security forces all around, making sure everything's run smoothly.